The beaches of Indonesia were alive with firepower. Amphibious assault vehicles rolled ashore, fighter jets screamed overhead, and warships dotted the horizon. It was no ordinary military drill. This was Super Garuda Shield 2025, the largest joint exercise ever held between the United States, Indonesia, and a host of ASEAN partners. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive from Naval Brief. On the surface, it looked like a grand show of Allied solidarity. Thousands of troops from across the Pacific marched, maneuvered, and drilled in lockstep. But beneath the pageantry, the message was sharper. This wasn't just training. This was a rehearsal for a crisis, one that could easily ignite in the contested waters of the South China Sea. Super Garuda Shield began years ago as a modest exercise between the US and Indonesia. Now it has swelled into a multinational spectacle. In 2025, more than 6,500 troops from over a dozen nations participated, including Japan, Australia, Singapore, the Philippines, and even observers from NATO. That growth tells its own story. ASEAN security concerns can no longer be handled quietly, bilaterally, or behind closed doors. The risks are too big. The region is too vital. Drills like this aren't just about ships and soldiers. They're about signaling. Every amphibious landing says, we can reinforce islands. Every air defense drill says, we can blunt missile salvos. Every convoy protection exercise says, we can keep the sea lanes open. And these signals were directed at one audience in particular, Beijing. China has long claimed almost the entire South China Sea through its sweeping 9-dash line. Its Coast Guard and maritime militia have harassed foreign fishing boats, shadowed resupply runs, and even collided with rival ships. For Southeast Asia, that constant pressure isn't an abstract problem. It's an everyday grind. Super Garuda Shield was designed to show that ASEAN isn't standing alone, and that the United States is prepared to back them up. For Indonesia, hosting the drill was a balancing act. Jakarta has historically tried to avoid being dragged into great power rivalries. But in recent years, Chinese Coast Guard patrols have edged closer to Indonesia's Natuna Islands, raising alarm bells. By opening its beaches, skies, and harbors to this exercise, Indonesia sent a message. It will defend its sovereignty, and it will not shy away from working with outside powers to do so. The drill itself spanned land, sea, air, and even cyberspace. Amphibious forces stormed mock beaches. Naval squadrons practiced convoy escort missions through crowded straits. Fighter jets staged dogfights, while air defense crews tracked simulated missile salvos. And behind the scenes, cyber units ran red team and blue team attacks on mock networks, training to keep command and control systems alive under pressure. That breadth matters. Modern conflict won't be fought on just one domain. It will hit all at once. Observers noted that Super Garuda Shield 2025 even included exercises in space coordination, satellites linking real-time battlefield data. It may not have looked flashy, but that's the cutting edge. Keeping fleets connected when missiles are flying could decide who wins the first hours of a war. ASEAN unity, however, is complicated. Not every member joined in full. Vietnam and the Philippines eagerly took part, both locked in bitter disputes with China over reefs and shoals. Singapore, with its advanced navy, contributed high-tech capabilities. But Cambodia and Laos kept their distance, wary of offending Beijing. That split reveals the challenge. ASEAN wants to project unity, but China's influence still fractures the group. Super Garuda Shield was as much about bridging those cracks as it was about military readiness. For Washington, the stakes were high. U.S. credibility in Asia has been tested repeatedly. Allies worry. Would America really show up in a crisis? By putting boots on Indonesian beaches, jets in ASEAN skies, and warships in contested waters, Washington aimed to answer that doubt. For U.S. commanders, it was about proving logistics too. Could they actually surge forces across the Pacific fast enough to matter? History gave the drill extra weight. The same waters where troops landed once hosted World War II battles. Operation Torch, the island-hopping campaigns, the liberation of the Philippines. Echoes of those fights still shape the Pacific today. For ASEAN, the message was clear. History shows that coalition forces can prevail in these waters. Super Garuda Shield linked that past to the present. Of course, Beijing watched closely. State media dismissed the exercise as theatrics, claiming it wouldn't deter China's sovereign rights. But behind closed doors, analysts admitted that amphibious drills, in particular, sting. China has invested heavily in its own amphibious capabilities to pressure Taiwan. Watching U.S. Marines and ASEAN troops practice the same playbook on beaches just south of the South China Sea was an unmistakable warning. The drills weren't only about China, though. Piracy, smuggling, and illegal fishing still plague Southeast Asia. Coordinated patrols and information-sharing practice during Super Garuda Shield could make the region safer day to day. But no one missed the bigger point. These skills scale up. The same coordination that catches smugglers can keep oil tankers flowing through the Malacca Strait in wartime. Still, the exercise wasn't without risk. Large multinational drills create their own friction. Different navies use different protocols, different comms, even different fuels. Missteps can cause accidents. More importantly, Beijing could view the whole event as provocation, raising tensions further. That's the delicate balance ASEAN walks. Deter aggression without sparking escalation. Yet for many in the region, the benefits outweigh the risks. Seeing American carriers anchored off Indonesia, Australian frigates maneuvering alongside Singaporean corvettes, and Philippine Marines drilling next to Japanese self-defense forces sent a powerful message. This wasn't just America plus a partner. This was a coalition, messy, diverse, but united by shared stakes. One striking image came from the opening ceremony. ASEAN and U.S. troops standing shoulder to shoulder, their national flags fluttering in the background. A visual of unity meant to send a message across the Indo-Pacific. For citizens watching back home, whether in Manila, Hanoi, or Jakarta, it showed their militaries weren't standing alone. That reassurance is part of the exercise's purpose. What happens next? Drills end, ships sail home, troops demobilize. But the effects linger. China now knows that in the event of a crisis, ASEAN and its allies have rehearsed together. They've mapped the beaches, synced their communications, practiced their supply lines. That kind of preparation can tip the scales in deterrence. Critics argue it's just theater. After all, no exercise can replicate the fog of real combat. But theater has value too. In geopolitics, perception shapes behavior. If Beijing believes ASEAN is weak and divided, it will press harder. If Beijing sees a coalition rehearsed and ready, it may think twice. In the end, Super Garuda Shield was more than a drill. It was a statement. A statement that Southeast Asia is not just a chessboard for outside powers, but a region where local nations, backed by global allies, are willing to stand together. Anchor this is Naval Brief, your briefing room for sea power and defense analysis. If you're all hands on deck for real naval operations, maritime conflict, and global defense, subscribe and stay mission ready for the next briefing.